Have you ever felt the fire of anger rise in your chest when someone insults you? In that split second, you lose your power. But what if you could become entirely untouchable? Today, we uncover 5 Stoic secrets to mastering your mind when others test your patience. Listen closely. The sun beat down on the marble pillars of the Roman Forum, baking the ancient city in a stifling, heavy afternoon heat. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meats, stale dust, and the sweat of 10,000 citizens bartering, arguing, and rushing about their daily lives. Amidst this chaotic symphony of the empire, a young apprentice named Lucius hurried along the cobblestones. He carried a leather satchel filled with important ledgers for his mentor, Gaius, an elder statesman renowned not just for his political acumen, but for his unshakable Stoic demeanor. Lucius was young, ambitious, and carried the fiery pride typical of a man trying to make his mark in a ruthless world. He walked with a brisk, determined pace, his mind focused solely on his duties. Suddenly, a heavy, jewel-adorned hand shoved him hard in the chest. Lucius stumbled backward, his sandals slipping on the smooth stones. His satchel hit the ground, and several scrolls spilled out into the dusty thoroughfare. He looked up to see Valerius, a wealthy and notoriously arrogant patrician, flanked by 2 towering bodyguards. Valerius had not been looking where he was going, but in the hierarchy of Rome, it did not matter. "Watch your step, you clumsy stray," Valerius sneered, his voice dripping with venomous condescension. He didn't stop there. Seeing the crest of Gaius on Lucius's tunic, Valerius laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Ah, the lapdog of the old philosopher. Tell me, boy, does he teach you to grovel in the dirt, or is that just your natural state? You look like a beggar playing dress-up." In an instant, a physiological storm erupted within Lucius. It started in his stomach, a tight, twisting knot of humiliation, and rapidly surged upward into his chest. His heart began to hammer against his ribs like a trapped bird. The blood roared in his ears, drowning out the ambient noise of the forum. His vision narrowed, tunneling directly onto the smug, mocking face of Valerius. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ground together, and his hands instinctively balled into fists. This was disrespect. This was an attack on his honor, his mentor, and his very existence. The animal part of his brain screamed for retribution. He wanted to lunge forward, to strike the patrician, to wipe that arrogant smile off his face, regardless of the towering bodyguards. He drew a sharp breath, his muscles coiling like a spring, preparing to release a barrage of furious words and violent action. Before he could move a single inch, a firm, heavy hand rested on his right shoulder. It was Gaius. The old master had been walking a few paces behind. His grip was not painful, but it was profoundly grounding, an anchor dropped into a tempestuous sea. Gaius did not look at Valerius. He looked only at Lucius, his dark eyes pools of absolute, undisturbed tranquility. "Wait," Gaius said softly. "Just one word." Valerius sneered again, muttered an insult under his breath, and pushed past them into the crowd, his bodyguards in tow. Lucius was trembling, fighting against the physical restraint of his mentor. "Master, he insulted us. He insulted you. You cannot let him walk away," Lucius hissed, his voice cracking with outrage. Gaius slowly knelt, ignoring the murmurs of the passing crowd, and began to calmly gather the fallen scrolls. "Help me pick these up, Lucius." "But the scrolls, Lucius." Reluctantly, his hand still shaking with residual adrenaline, Lucius helped gather the papers. They walked the rest of the way back to Gaius's villa in total silence. Lucius's mind raced the entire time. He replayed the insult over and over, thinking of all the clever, biting retorts he should have said. He imagined himself striking Valerius down, The anger was a hot coal burning in his chest, and he was doing everything he could to keep it stoked. When they finally arrived at the serene courtyards of the villa, shaded by ancient olive trees and cooled by a trickling fountain, Gaius sat on a marble bench and motioned for Lucius to do the same. "You are still breathing heavily, my boy," Gaius observed mildly. "Your face is flushed. Your mind is still back in the forum, fighting a ghost." "He had no right," Lucius protested, staring at the ground. "He disrespected me for no reason. It was an intolerable offense." Gaius nodded slowly. "And tell me, Lucius, what would you have done if I hadn't placed my hand upon your shoulder?" "I would have defended my honor. I would have made him regret his words." "You would have struck a patrician's bodyguard, been beaten half to death in the street, and likely brought legal ruin upon yourself and my household," Gaius said, his voice devoid of judgment, merely stating facts. "And for what? For words? For vibrations in the air made by a fool's tongue?" Gaius leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. The first and most critical lesson in the art of remaining calm is the mastery of the pause. The great philosopher Seneca wrote extensively on the madness of anger. He taught that anger is a temporary insanity. When it flares, we are not ourselves. We are hijacked by our basest instincts. The greatest remedy for anger, Seneca tells us, is delay. Lucius looked up, still defensive. "Delay? So I am just to stand there and accept the insult? Is that not cowardice?" "It is the exact opposite of cowardice," Gaius replied. "It is the ultimate display of power. Think about what happens when you react instantly to an insult. The person who insulted you has pulled a string, and like a wooden puppet, you danced. They commanded you to be angry, and you obeyed. They dictated your heart rate, your blood pressure, your thoughts, and your actions. When you react in the heat of the moment, you hand the remote control of your soul over to your enemy." Gaius pointed to the trickling fountain. "When a stone is thrown into a still pool, the water splashes frantically. But if the water is deep, the stone eventually settles at the bottom, and the surface returns to glass. When Valerius threw his stone of disrespect at you, your immediate instinct was to splash, to boil, to rage. But the Stoic way is to insert a space between the stimulus, the insult, and your response. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. When you feel that fire rising," Gaius continued, "you must learn to freeze. Take a breath. Take 2. Count to 10 in your mind. Tell yourself, I will not act on this now. I will address this in a moment." This simple act of delaying your reaction deprives the anger of its initial explosive fuel. It allows the rational part of your mind, the part that separates us from the beasts, to step forward and take the reins. Lucius absorbed the words. The knot in his chest began to loosen, just slightly. "So when you touched my shoulder and told me to wait, you were forcing the pause upon me." "I was," Gaius smiled gently, "because you have not yet built the discipline to command it yourself. But you must practice this. The next time someone tests your patience, tests your ego, or acts with blatant disrespect, do not fight back immediately. Do not speak. Just pause. In that brief silence, you reclaim your power. You remind yourself that you are the master of your own mind, not the provocateur. Only after the initial rush of venom has passed through your veins can you decide how a wise, dignified man should respond." Lucius stared at the water in the fountain. The ripples from a falling leaf slowly dissipated, leaving the surface perfectly calm. He realized that in his desire to look strong in front of Valerius, he had almost surrendered every ounce of his true strength. The pause wasn't surrender. It was a fortress. Night had fallen over Rome, cloaking the great city in shadows and the cool relief of a Mediterranean breeze. Inside the villa, the oil lamps flickered, casting long, dancing silhouettes against the frescoed walls. The household was asleep, save for the rhythmic pacing of footsteps in the central garden. It was Lucius. Despite the profound lesson he had received earlier that afternoon, the ghost of the encounter in the forum refused to leave him. He had successfully paused. He had avoided a physical altercation. Yet, as he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, Valerius's sneering voice echoed relentlessly in the chambers of his mind. Clumsy stray, beggar playing dress-up, lapdog. Every time the word cycled through his thoughts, Lucius felt a renewed surge of shame and indignation. His ego was bruised, and the bruise throbbed in the quiet of the night. Unable to find peace, he had wandered into the garden, hoping the cool air would extinguish the smouldering embers of his pride. "The stars are entirely indifferent to your pacing, Lucius," a voice called out softly from the shadows. Lucius stopped and turned. Gaius was sitting wrapped in a woolen shawl on a stone bench under the trellis of grapevines, holding a warm cup of herbal tea. He patted the empty space beside him. Lucius walked over, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and sat down. "I am sorry, master. I did not mean to wake you. I cannot sleep. I feel like a fool." "Why do you feel like a fool?" Gaius asked, taking a slow sip of his tea. "Because I know I should be calm. I know I should practice the pause. But my mind is a torture chamber right now. Valerius is miles away, likely asleep in his opulent bed, completely unbothered by what happened today. Yet here I am, robbing myself of rest, replaying his insults. He is still attacking me, even though he is not here." Gaius smiled warmly, a smile of deep empathy, for he too had been a young man once. "Ah, you have discovered a profound truth of the human condition, Lucius. Valerius is not attacking you tonight. Valerius ceased his attack hours ago. The man attacking you right now is you." Lucius frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "It is his words that hurt me." "Are they?" Gaius challenged gently. He reached down and picked up a smooth stone from the garden path. He held it up in the moonlight. "If I were to throw this stone at your leg, it would strike you, bruise your flesh, and cause you physical pain. The stone is the source of the injury. But words are not stones. Words are merely air pushed through a larynx, shaped by a tongue, and sent out into the void. They have no physical mass. They cannot cut your skin or break your bones." Gaius placed the stone back on the ground. The great philosopher Epictetus taught a principle that acts as an impenetrable armor for the mind. He said, "It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them." Lucius pondered this. "My judgments?" "Yes," Gaius affirmed. "Let us dissect what actually happened today. Stripped of all emotion, what were the objective facts? A man bumped into you. He made a series of vocalizations. He then walked away. That is the entirety of the event. It is morally neutral. It has no inherent power to harm your soul." Gaius leaned closer, his eyes locking onto Lucius's. "Where the suffering begins is in the story you attach to the event." The event was, he called me a beggar. Your judgment of the event was, being called a beggar is a terrible insult. It lowers my status. It means I am disrespected. It is an outrage that must be avenged. The words didn't hurt you, Lucius. Your agreement with the premise that the words were harmful is what hurt you. But it was objectively disrespectful, Lucius argued, his frustration flaring again. Society dictates that a man must defend his honor against such things. Society dictates many foolish things, Gaius replied calmly. Society dictates that men should slaughter each other in the Colosseum for entertainment. We are not philosophers to follow the whims of the mob. We are philosophers to find truth. And the truth is, no man can degrade you without your active consent. Gaius stood and walked to the edge of the fountain, trailing his fingers in the cool water. Imagine someone hands your physical body over to a random stranger on the street, allowing them to drag you around, beat you, and abuse you. You would be furious. You would fight with every breath to defend your body. Yet, when someone insults you, you eagerly hand over your mind to them. You allow their words to drag your thoughts through the mud, to beat your self-esteem, to abuse your peace. Why do you fiercely guard your flesh, which is mortal and frail, but so readily surrender your mind, which is your true citadel? Lucius fell silent. The weight of the master's words settled over him like a heavy, comforting blanket. He saw the absurdity of his own suffering. He was stabbing himself with a phantom dagger. This is the practice of cognitive distancing, Gaius explained, returning to the bench. When you feel the sting of disrespect, you must separate the raw data of the event from the subjective judgment you are attaching to it. You must strip the insult of its emotional clothing and look at it naked. How do I do that in practice? Lucius asked, his voice softer now, eager for the tool that could relieve his inner torment. By changing the language in your mind, Gaius instructed. When the thought arises, he humiliated me, you must actively correct it. You say to yourself, no. He uttered words. I am choosing to feel humiliated. You remind yourself that Valerius's mind is his own. It is chaotic, arrogant, and flawed. Whatever he thinks of you is a reflection of his character, not yours. You cannot control what he thinks or says. You can only control what you make it mean. Gaius placed a comforting hand on Lucius's shoulder, the same hand that had saved him in the forum. If a madman barks at you in the street, do you take it personally? Do you feel your honor is destroyed because a lunatic yelled at you? No, Lucius chuckled softly. Of course not. I would just pity him. Exactly, because you have judged that the madman's words have no validity. You have cognitively distanced yourself from his ramblings. I tell you this, Lucius. A man who insults strangers to inflate his own pride is just as diseased in the mind as the madman barking at the moon. Treat his insults with the same indifference. Let his words pass through you like wind through the branches of these olive trees. The branches may sway, but the tree remains rooted. Lucius took a deep breath of the fragrant night air. For the first time since the encounter in the forum, the tight knot in his chest completely dissolved. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, quiet clarity. He realized that he held the keys to his own emotional prison. Valerius had never locked him in. Lucius had locked the door himself and spent the night raging against the bars. I understand, Master, Lucius whispered. The insult only lands if I provide the target. Precisely, Gaius smiled, satisfied. Now go to sleep. Your mind is your own again. Guard it well. A week had passed since the incident in the forum. The relentless Roman summer continued to bake the city, driving its citizens to seek refuge in the sprawling, cavernous complexes of the public bathhouses. Lucius and Gaius found themselves in the tepidarium of one such magnificent structure, a vast hall of vaulted ceilings, intricate mosaic floors, and thick, humid air that carried the mingled scents of eucalyptus, olive oil, and damp stone. The echoing acoustics of the bathhouse usually created a low, soothing hum of conversation. But today, that peace was shattered by a piercing, furious voice. Lucius opened his eyes, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, and looked across the misty room. There, standing near the edge of a marble pool, completely red in the face, was Valerius. The arrogant patrician was screaming at an elderly, frail bath attendant. "You incompetent, wretched creature!" Valerius bellowed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, drawing the stares of everyone in the room. "I asked for the Egyptian oil. This is cheap Sabine trash. Do you think my skin is as coarse as yours? You dare to bring this to me?" The old attendant was trembling violently, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the wet mosaic tiles. "Dominus, I beg your forgiveness. The steward informed me that the Egyptian supply was exhausted. I only meant to—" "I do not care what the steward said," Valerius roared, kicking a bronze bucket of water, so hard it clattered violently across the floor, splashing the legs of nearby bathers who quickly scrambled away. "You are all useless, surrounded by idiots and thieves." Valerius's chest heaved. The veins in his neck were bulging against his skin. Despite his immense wealth, his fine food, and his elevated status, in that moment he looked completely miserable. He looked like a man being tortured from the inside out. Lucius watched the scene unfold. A few days ago, the sight of Valerius would have triggered a spike of adrenaline and hatred in his blood. He would have remembered the insult in the forum and felt the sting of wounded pride. But today, armed with the discipline of the pause and the shield of cognitive distancing, Lucius felt no anger. His heart rate remained steady. His breathing was calm. Instead of anger, a strange, unfamiliar emotion began to wash over him as he watched the patrician rave and spit. "Master," Lucius whispered, leaning closer to Gaius, who was sitting beside him, his eyes closed in serene relaxation. "It is Valerius again." Gaius slowly opened his eyes and turned his gaze toward the commotion. He watched Valerius for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before sighing softly. "Tell me, Lucius," Gaius said, his voice a low, steady murmur beneath the echoes of Valerius's tirade. "What do you see when you look at him?" "I see a tyrant," Lucius replied immediately. "I see an arrogant, cruel man who enjoys tormenting those weaker than him." "Look deeper," Gaius instructed gently. "Peel back the layer of your own judgment. Look at his physical state. Look at his eyes." Lucius focused intently on Valerius. He noticed the frantic, darting movements of the patrician's eyes. He saw the tight, painful clenching of his jaw, the excessive sweat pouring down his face that had nothing to do with the heat of the baths, and the jagged, shallow rhythm of his breathing. "He looks frantic," Lucius admitted. "He looks as though he is in pain." "He is," Gaius nodded. "The Emperor Marcus Aurelius, a man who possessed more power than anyone on earth and faced betrayals and disrespect that would break a normal mind, wrote profoundly on this subject. He taught that when someone does you wrong or acts with blatant viciousness, you should not feel anger. You should feel pity." Lucius frowned, struggling to reconcile this idea. "Pity? For a man who abuses the helpless and insults strangers for sport? Why should I pity a monster? Because he is not a monster, Lucius. He is a sick man," Gaius explained, his eyes filled with a profound, almost sorrowful compassion. The Stoics believe that all human beings naturally desire the good. We all want happiness, peace, and security. When a man acts with cruelty, arrogance, or disrespect, It is not because he is inherently evil. It is because he is deeply ignorant. He operates under the false impression that crushing others will make him feel powerful, that demanding perfection from slaves will bring him peace. But look at him. Does he look peaceful? No, Lucius said softly. He looks like a slave to his own rage. Exactly, he is a prisoner, Gaius said, turning fully to face Lucius. When a man's body is sick with a fever, he shivers, he vomits, he acts delirious. We do not get angry at the sick man for shivering. We understand that his body is malfunctioning. It is the exact same with the soul. A man who disrespects others has a diseased mind. His soul is inflamed with arrogance, insecurity, and false judgments. The anger he inflicts on the world is merely a symptom of the torment he endures within himself. Gaius pointed a discreet finger at Valerius, who was now storming out of the hall, muttering darkly to himself, leaving the trembling attendant behind. To be angry at someone who disrespects you is as foolish as being angry at a blind man for bumping into you in the street, Gaius continued. They do not see clearly. Their moral vision is clouded. When Valerius insulted you in the forum, he was not reacting to you, Lucius. He was reacting to his own inner turmoil, his own need to assert dominance, because he feels, deep down, small and terrified of a world he cannot perfectly control. Lucius felt a profound shift in his perspective. The remnants of his lingering resentment evaporated, replaced by a cool, clear understanding. He realized that holding a grudge against Valerius was like drinking poison and expecting the other man to die. Valerius was already drinking his own poison every single day. This is the third pillar of staying calm, Gaius said, resting his hand on Lucius's knee. It is the mirror of empathy. When someone attacks you, insults you, or tests your patience, you must instantly recognize that they are suffering. Happy, fulfilled, wise people do not spend their days seeking out ways to disrespect others. Only the miserable do that. Lucius nodded slowly, absorbing the immense power of this concept. If I view them as sick or wounded, then their insults are just the cries of a suffering animal. Precisely, Gaius smiled. And how does a wise man treat a wounded, snapping dog? With caution, perhaps. With firmness, certainly. But never with hatred. You do not lower yourself to the level of the beast. You maintain your humanity. You pity their lack of self-mastery. And you use their poor example as a reminder of what you never wish to become. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Marcus Aurelius. When you are tested, Gaius concluded, do not ask yourself, how dare they? Instead, ask yourself, what heavy burden must they be carrying to act in such a pitiful way? When you replace outrage with empathy, you extinguish the fire of their disrespect in the vast ocean of your understanding. Their words lose their edge, and you remain entirely untouched. As they sat in the steamy silence of the bathhouse, Lucius felt a sudden, strange gratitude toward Valerius. The miserable patrician had unknowingly become his greatest teacher, providing the very friction required to sharpen Lucius's philosophical blade. He now had the pause to stop his reaction, the distance to protect his mind, and the empathy to neutralize his enemy. He was building an armor that no weapon forged by human malice could pierce. Autumn swept through Rome, stripping the sycamore trees of their golden leaves and bringing a crisp chill to the air. Lucius had spent weeks practicing his master's teachings on minor daily grievances, a cheating merchant, a rude cart driver, but a true test of his Stoic armor soon arrived. One morning, Gaius found himself bedridden with a severe flare-up of gout. Pain lines etched his weathered face as he handed Lucius a heavy, wax-sealed scroll. This petition must reach the magistrate of the urban prefecture before noon, or our clients will lose their lands, Gaius grunted, adjusting his swollen foot. Beware, Lucius. The magistrate's antechamber is guarded by a pack of ambitious junior bureaucrats. They know my political influence is waning, and they may try to humiliate you to strike at me. Remember your training. Arriving at the Grand Basilica, Lucius was directed to a lavish, marble-lined waiting room. Lounging on silk cushions were 3 junior magistrates, clad in impossibly fine togas, sipping watered wine. They carried the unmistakable arrogance of inherited, unearned power. Lucius approached the desk. "I am Lucius, apprentice to Gaius. I carry an urgent petition." The tallest of the 3, a sharp-nosed patrician named Cassius, set his wine down and sauntered over, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He looked Lucius up and down, noting his plain wool tunic and scuffed sandals. "Gaius sent his errand boy," Cassius sneered, raising his voice to ensure the whole room heard. Has the old man finally lost his mind, sending a street urchin to handle state matters? I suppose when a man's career is dying, he must rely on the cheapest help. His companions chuckled from the benches. Instantly, the familiar, hot flare of anger ignited in Lucius's chest. "The pause," he commanded himself. He froze, taking a slow, deliberate breath. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. He applied cognitive distancing. These are just words, vibrations in the air. He looked at the laughing men and applied the mirror of empathy. He saw insecure boys desperately trying to prove their superiority, prisoners of their own fragile egos. But how should he respond? He needed to complete his mission without groveling, yet without starting a brawl. It was then that the core teaching of the philosopher Epictetus echoed in his mind, the dichotomy of control. Some things are in our control and others not, Epictetus taught. Lucius realized with diamond-clear precision that Cassius's disrespect was entirely outside of his control. He could not force this arrogant boy to be polite, nor could he control his master's reputation in this room. But what was in his control? His own character, his own dignity. Gaius had once called this the inner citadel. The enemy can burn the fields outside. They can hurl insults over the walls, but they can never breach the gates of the citadel unless you open them from the inside. Your virtue is the only thing you truly own. Lucius looked Cassius directly in the eyes. He did not scowl, nor did he smile. His face became a mask of absolute, unshakable tranquility. He held out the wax-sealed scroll. The petition requires the magistrate's seal before noon, in accordance with the law, Lucius said. His voice was perfectly level, completely devoid of anger or fear. It was the voice of a man who was entirely untouchable. I trust you will see it delivered to his desk, as is your duty to the state. Cassius blinked. The cruel smirk vanished, replaced by sudden, awkward confusion. He had thrown a spear of insult with all his might, and it had passed straight through Lucius as if hitting empty air. The complete lack of emotional reaction made Cassius's aggressive posturing feel incredibly childish. The laughter from the benches abruptly died. The silence in the room grew heavy, but the discomfort belonged entirely to them. Mechanically, Cassius took the scroll. He opened his mouth to deliver another barb, but looking into Lucius's serene, pitying eyes, the words caught in his throat. "It will be delivered," he muttered, looking away. "Thank you." "I wish you a productive morning," Lucius said, bowing his head slightly in simple, professional courtesy. He turned and walked out of the basilica. Out in the crisp autumn air, he didn't feel the adrenaline crash of a man who had narrowly escaped a fight. He felt an overwhelming, radiant peace. He had been insulted to his face, yet he had lost nothing. By retreating into his inner citadel, he proved that when you anchor your self-worth to your own internal character, the disrespect of the world simply cannot reach you. Lucius returned to the villa just as the midday sun reached its zenith, casting sharp, brilliant shadows across the courtyards. He found Gaius exactly where he had left him, propped up on silken pillows in his bedchamber, reading a weathered scroll. As Lucius recounted the events at the urban prefecture, the sneers of Cassius, the laughter of the junior magistrates, and his own unshakable calm, a proud, gentle smile spread across the old master's weathered face. "You stood inside your inner citadel," Gaius murmured, setting his scroll aside. "You did not hand over your peace to a boy dressed in a magistrate's robes. You have done well, Lucius. Very well indeed." Lucius bowed his head, a warm glow of satisfaction spreading through his chest. "Thank you, Master. I feel victorious. I feel as though I defeated Cassius without throwing a single punch." Gaius's smile faded just a fraction, his dark eyes growing piercing and profound. "Ah, there is the final trap, my boy." Lucius looked up, confused. "Trap? But I maintained my virtue. I did exactly as you taught." "You did," Gaius agreed softly. "But listen to your own words. I feel victorious. I defeated him. Even in your Stoic restraint, the ego still seeks a crown. You are still holding on to the event. You are still carrying Cassius in your mind, treating him as a defeated rival. As long as you view this as a battle between two men, you remain tethered to the very disrespect you claim to have transcended." Gaius painfully shifted his weight, waving Lucius closer to the bedside. "The ultimate liberation from the disrespect of others does not come from feeling superior to them. It comes from realizing how unfathomably insignificant the entire encounter truly is. The fifth and final way to master your mind is to practice the view from above." Lucius sat on a wooden stool beside the bed, giving his master his full attention. "Close your eyes, Lucius," Gaius commanded gently. Lucius closed his eyes. The ambient sounds of the villa, the distant clatter of pots in the kitchen, the wind rustling the olive branches, sharpened in his awareness. "Imagine your own body sitting here in this room," Gaius began, his voice taking on a rhythmic, hypnotic cadence. "Now, lift your mind's eye to the ceiling. Look down at us, an old, sick man and his young apprentice. Now, rise higher. Look down upon the entire villa. See the servants working, the guards at the gate. Rise higher still. Look down upon the city of Rome. See the millions of souls scuttling through the streets like ants, arguing in the Forum, dying in the Colosseum, plotting in the palaces." Lucius visualized the sprawling, chaotic metropolis shrinking beneath him. "Now," Gaius whispered, "rise above the clouds. Look at the entire empire, stretching from the rainy shores of Britannia to the burning sands of Egypt. See the armies marching, the kings rising and falling. Keep going, Lucius. See the earth as a tiny sphere suspended in the infinite, freezing void of the cosmos, surrounded by stars that have burned for eons before we were born, and will burn for eons after we are dust." Lucius felt a profound sense of vertigo, followed by a sweeping, breathtaking awe. The vastness of the universe was a crushing, beautiful weight. In the scope of eternity, in the boundless theater of the cosmos, Gaius asked quietly. What does it matter that a speck of dust named Cassius vibrated the air at a speck of dust named Lucius on a Tuesday morning in Rome? The question hung in the air, echoing in the vast emptiness Lucius had conjured in his mind. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius used this exact practice, Gaius explained, his voice grounding Lucius back into the room. When the heavy burdens of ruling the world threatened to crush him, when the betrayals and insults of men drove him to despair, he would zoom out. He wrote, "Think of substance in its entirety, of which you have the smallest of shares, and of time in its entirety, of which a brief and momentary span has been assigned to you, and of the works of destiny, and how very small is your part in them." Lucius opened his eyes. The room felt different. His own body felt lighter. The lingering glow of his victory over Cassius had vanished, replaced by something far more durable. A deep, quiet humility. When you zoom out, Lucius, you realize that almost everything we agonize over is completely meaningless. Disrespect, insults, bruised egos. These are the petty dramas of mortals who have forgotten they are mortal. Why let an insult ruin your day when your days are so fleetingly few? The view from above shrinks our enemies into nothingness, and in doing so, it shrinks our own ego into nothingness as well. Lucius understood. The first four ways, the pause, cognitive distancing, the mirror of empathy, and the citadel of virtue, were shields to protect him. But the view from above was different. It wasn't a shield. It was the realization that there was nothing to protect. He was just a fleeting spark of consciousness in a vast, indifferent universe. His only duty was to burn brightly with reason and kindness for the short time he had left. "Thank you, Master," Lucius whispered, looking out the window at the eternal Roman sky. He knew that tomorrow would bring new insults, new trials, and new tests of his patience. But he also knew that he was finally, truly, untouchable. True strength isn't found in a loud reaction, but in the quiet mastery of your own mind. You are the sole architect of your peace. When you learn to pause, distance your thoughts, apply empathy, guard your inner citadel, and zoom out to see the cosmos, you become entirely untouchable. If this journey into Stoic wisdom brought you value today, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. Stay calm, stay stoic.